A nice discussion.
I hope so.
Oh, that's it, definitely. We'll have it because we have really very good speakers. One second. They are joining us.
A nice discussion.
I hope so.
Oh, that's it, definitely. We'll have it because we have really very good speakers. Sorry. Zlatko is all ready.
Mr. Muradov, can you go again through to us what we're going to do now?
Yes, we will be having actually Zlatko Lagumdzija, former Prime Minister of Bosnia, will be our moderator, and we'll be having each 3 minutes intervention. And then we are going to have question and answers for 1 round, for 2 and 3 rounds, which will all together 1 hour 30 minutes. But we know about your case, Your Highness, that you have to leave in 1 hour. That's why we informed moderator.
Very well.
Good morning, Roshan.
Good morning, Dr. David.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning to you.
Morning.
Hi.
Dr. David.
Sorry, there's some background noise. I have a young helper, my grandson.
David Chikvaidze is the head of United Nations director of the United Nations office in Geneva.
That's not very impressive for these ladies and gentlemen who have titles much more important than mine.
Oh, no. What you do is very important.
Yeah, well, behind the scenes.
We need to give you more support for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's exactly my point of what I'm going to say, part of it.
Yeah.
I would say even more. Personality matters, titles don't matter too much as the personalities.
That's true.
Titles just mean different experiences.
I think some of you need to give the current heads of state and government a little bit of a master class in how to take care of their organization.
Hi, Madam President. How are you?
Well, fine, thank you. I'm so pleased to see you all. Hi, Kolinda. It's really a pleasure. I haven't seen you for quite some time. I'm really so pleased. Well, I'm really pleased to see all of you this morning. Well, good morning, Roshan.
Good morning.
Hi, Turkey, and well, and everybody.
How
are things in Malta?
Well, a sunny day, a beautiful sunny day. It's a Mediterranean, beautiful sunny day.
None of the snow that's hitting Europe?
Pardon?
None of the snow that's hitting Europe?
No, no, no. We've been spared. We've been spared. It's very rare that we get snow in the Mediterranean.
Yes.
But it is doesn't feel like February. Usually February, it's quite cold, well, and very humid as usual due to the fact that we're an island, a small island surrounded by the sea, obviously. But, well, it's really a beautiful day.
I see they had a sandstorm in the Alps, and we're having snow in Saudi Arabia.
Oh my God.
That tells you where the world is going.
Yes, yes. Well, undoubtedly, this is evidence of climate change. So this is something, so it's people who do not believe in climate change must be really not seeing things, to be honest.
Hi, Zlatko. How are you?
Hello, how are you, Roshan? I see friendly faces in here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. So we have people all over.
Yeah, I think we can wait for a couple of minutes.
In the afternoon, we have a second panel, which is more adjusted to our American friends, and that's the reason why we have this, so to speak, Euro Middle East gathering as a first part of our today's web conference. So, Roshan, you organized.
I think we can start. Everyone is here.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, so, well, first, I want to greet everyone, and let's say I have a modest role of moderator of this event among friends. So this is going to be really truly friendly discussion among the members of the NGIC family. And of course, most of us were knowing each other from different perspectives, different roles in time that is behind us. And I'm very happy that we are, thanks to Nizami Ganjabi, our Secretary General. We call him, by the way, for the new members. And I want to greet new members of NGIC family, Madam President Kolinda Grabar Kitarovic. So greetings. You and me are currently, I think, in the same country because I'm in Croatia. I'm spending my week here in Istria doing some conferences and some paperwork. So, I mean, I am from Bosnia, but I want to welcome my dear friend Kolinda Grabar Kitarovic, President of Croatia, who is a new member of NGIC, as well as Mr. Belka, Marek, former Prime Minister of Poland, who is with us here in this panel. And of course, Madam President Marie-Louise Coleiro Preca. I want to greet you as a new member of the NGIC family. So our today's convening is under the big title, umbrella title, Beyond the Pandemic, the Evolving World System and the Future of Democracy. We are, basically speaking, divided or united in two panels. First panel is devoted to evolving world system, and the title, How We Can Strengthen the International Multilateralism System and Free it from bureaucratic shackles that impede its action. Of course, this is just continuation of our events and web conferences and forums and meetings that we have been organizing since the beginning of the pandemic. And from the day one, we were very optimistic. We were trying to see what we'll do after pandemic goes, together with combating about pandemics. So this conference today is a discussion about how we will proceed and how we will, as some kind of alliance of like-minded people and entities under umbrella or using platform of NGIC, will share our thoughts in order to spread the ideas that we all have based on our experience and our values and the wish for new normal being better than the old normal, because some people are saying even if pandemic didn't hit us, we would need new normal. So I mean, this crisis is forcing us to go for search for new normal and to have this post-corona era being significantly better than previous era or the era that we are hopefully closing down. I would first call my dear friend, His Royal Highness, Prince Turki Al bin Faisal Al Saud, who is the chairman of the board of King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies. Just to remind you of the format that we agreed, we'll try to have short introductory interventions in scale of 3 to 4 minutes in order to have 2 additional rounds of our discussions and interactions and the questions that will raise from. At the same time, if you have, let's say for introductory remarks, let's say 2 times more than 3-4 minutes, then I would suggest you that whatever I ask you in the second round, you just go through your second part of your prepared intervention. So that way we will, let's say, keep to the schedule and try to have this as focused as possible and to hear each other as more as possible. So without further using your time, I would call His Royal Highness, my dear friend and brother, Prince Turki, to not take a floor, but to take the screen of NGIC, because this is the year, just to remind you, for us a great year of Nizami Ganjavi, that was named as the year of Nizami Ganjavi because he's entering 88th decade since he came to this world. And this is, for us as NGIC, we are naming, as well as President of Azerbaijan, President Aliyev, naming the year of Nizami Ganjavi because we want to have the philosophy and values of Nizami Ganjavi being heard more over the world, especially having in mind that we as NGIC are organized around the motto of Great Nizami, which is obviously when he was making those lines, he was probably thinking of 21st century and post-corona era, because he was calling for dialogue, tolerance, learning, and understanding. So Prince Turkey, you are the best person to start with. Dialogue, tolerance, learning, understanding as our motto. Please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This outlook on the future post-COVID will have to take into account what was happening before COVID. And there were enormous trends, particularly in the West, for more unilateralism and more, as it were, me first, and then the rest can follow afterwards. And that is, I think, what was affecting the world in general before COVID-19. COVID-19, I think, has shown us that that trend should not be adhered to. In the G20 meeting that we had in Saudi Arabia in November, the leadership of the summit agreed that unilateralism should be enforced and strengthened, not just on health issues, but on all issues, on trade, on science, on travel, on commerce, on everything like that. And this is where I think the post-COVID world should be heading. And now under the Italian leadership, I think the G20 will be developing those themes that came out of the meeting in Saudi Arabia. As far as COVID itself, as we see, it seems to be developing an ability to procreate and bear children that are of a different variety. And that is still a work in progress that people have not yet been definitive about. I'm not a scientist, so I cannot give you what that means for vaccines and other issues that need to be developed to meet that challenge. But it is something that cannot be done unilaterally. We have to be working with each other. And I think Nizami Ganjavi is an excellent platform to promote this idea of multilateralism. There is need, of course, to reform the existing multilateral institutions, particularly the United Nations. There has been a lot of talk about reforming the United Nations without action. And I think this is a responsibility for the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to consider that their privilege of veto is now more a hindrance than a help to meet the challenges of the world. Post-World War II is no longer viable to post-COVID, I think. And this is where I think the international community must come together and convince the 5 permanent members to go forward on that course of reform of the United Nations. We have no alternative to the United Nations. And that is why I think it is an important issue, and I will stop here and hopefully have refrained from being too verbose and sticking to the 3-minute time limit that our moderator has set for us.
I'm impressed as always, not only about the content, but this time about sharpness and sticking to our agreement. Thank you, my dear friend. And I hope that the next intervention you will be talking more about the role of education, because just as you mentioned, I mean, G20 and all these attempts that were under Saudi that were defined. There are 5 areas, if we can put as I can recall from from your presiding G20. I mean, first thing is, of course, health reform. There are no doubts about the epidemic itself. Second thing is environmental. What we will do with tackle environmental issues with the new strength. The third one is economy. Economy is not everything, but without economy, nothing else is possible. Fourth one would be technology and challenges of technologies in the sense what we can do with it. And five, and I think as far as I'm concerned, maybe I'm a little partial, the most important one is education. Education and education. And every time when I meet you, I always talk to you about education. I'm always impressed how energetic you are about the trust in the future based on the young people that are taking education all over the world in sides of being inclusive. So thank you so much, Prince Turkey.
Thank you, sir.
And of course, now I will call Madam, our new member, the closest person to me at this moment, because we are just 2 hours drive from each other. Madam President, a new member of Medgyessy family, Madam President Kolinda, Grabar, Kitarovic. And there is no need to say so many things about President Kolinda. I know her from the time when she was foreign minister, when she was ambassador in the United States. And she was ambassador in the United States just as well as Prince Turkey. There are so many ambassadors in the United States. So I'm sure that we will talk about the role of US in post-pandemic period as well. So Kolinda, can I ask you to take a screen?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Zlatko, for that kind introduction. And I do envy you that you're down on the coast in Istria. It's foggy in Zagreb today, and it's probably going to start raining. So not the nicest weather, but do enjoy Croatia. So dear friends, we have seen actually from the beginning of multilateralism that it has been under attack, and that we have been talking about the need to strengthen multilateralism. But it has been, the trend has been exacerbated by the pandemic and by the recent crisis. We see the multilateral world order being challenged, erosion of values inside and between societies, deeply polarized societies that are represented by uneasy coalitions and divided governments and factions that are unable to come together to make important policy decisions. And we see that in the international world order as well, globalization versus regionalization, or nationalism on the rise in all societies. And with the recent crisis, also the rise of the so-called COVID nationalism, where countries have been trying on their own to respond to not just the health crisis, but the developing economic and certainly social crisis. So what is needed right now? A lot of people have quoted throughout this pandemic what Winston Churchill once said: never let a good crisis go bad. So what Zlatko mentioned in the very beginning, I don't think we should be seeking a return to the old normal, or normal, whatever we call it. We need to look at the pandemic, and we need to take the lessons learned, both on the national and international level, and apply them in further reform of the multilateral system. In all this, the crucial role of the United Nations and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals needs to be maintained. But we also need to strengthen the role of multilateral financial institutions, because a lot of countries will need assistance, not just with dealing with the pandemics and their health systems, but also in dealing with the economic effects of this whole crisis. Now, for this to happen, we, of course, need to restore trust in the multilateral system among our citizens, first and foremost. And we need to dissipate and instill optimism in people that we will overcome this crisis, and that the long-term outlook will be better for all. We need a new vision that is based on empathy, on solidarity, that has been lacking in the past months, or actually the whole year of this pandemic. We need to take responsibility, courage, and we need cooperation. Global cooperation is needed to put this pandemic under control, as now that we have the vaccine. We need to keep in mind that until an overall percentage of population in the world has been vaccinated, not just in our own countries, we will not stop the pandemic. We also need to empower multilateral institutions, which means that states need to trust them more and need to be able to relinquish their power. And ultimately, multilateral institutions need to reflect what's happening on the ground to be able to overcome the bias against change and to respond to the needs of the demand of those countries and those societies that we're serving, rather than just the needs of the supply or the current makeup of the organizations. This, of course, will also mean reform of the United Nations to reflect more the situation on the ground and to be more inclusive, listening and responding to the needs of those whom we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I have to be honest with you that I mean, you really picked my brain by saying that we have to see how we can get to the all normal, and I think that's something that it's a very interesting idea, and it reminds me of a famous novel of Giuseppe Tommaso de Lampedusa, Il Gattopardo, when his main character is talking to his young nephew, talking about Italy, time of great changes. When he's explaining him what they have to adopt to the new situation, then the young nephew said, I understand you. We have to change everything if we want the things to remain the way they are. So it looks like we are going in search for Il Gattopardo principle. So see how we can keep the things that were good, but by changing everything that is necessary to go to the next level of our game. So thank you very, very much, Madam President, my dear Kolinda. And I'm now asking our new member, Marie-Louise, from I hope sunny Malta, right?
It's sunny, yes.
Because here in Rovinj it's raining. You see how it's unpredictable climate changes. In Zagreb, they expect rain. And here in Rovinj, in Adriatic, in beautiful part of Istria, I have rain outside. So I hope by the time we finish this, the sun will come. So, Madam Marie-Louise, would you take a screen, please?
Well, thank you so much, Zlatko, and dear friends and colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. It's a most interesting subject to discuss. We really know that the pandemic has highlighted much inequalities that have been there before the pandemic, but have been compounded by the pandemic. It has also highlighted that all determined borders are non-existent when we come to human suffering. And we must point that out and highlight that out. It also highlighted that our supposedly functioning democracy are not a guarantee and not enough to provide the necessary resilience for our citizens. The pandemic undoubtedly has highlighted also that no one is supreme in the face of adversity and unprecedented challenges. It also highlighted the need for more involvement of women in leadership, which is so essential. We have seen also through a study by Dublin University that female leadership countries that are being led by women, there has been 6 times less deaths due to the pandemic. The pandemic has also highlighted a weak multilateral system, but it also highlighted the need of a robust multilateral system with a mental change, with a reinforced commitment for an international community to move from promises to action. It has shown us that we cannot afford to continue rolling out promises from one decade to another and fail to reach the objectives of ensuring human rights and dignity to one and all. For the last nearly 8 years, since the UN Declaration of Human Rights came into being, humanity has been struggling to achieve and enjoy what world governments and leaders had promised to observe and safeguard. Human rights, despite the objective of being universal have never really been universal, have never been really and truly enjoyed by all. And we must acknowledge this. If human rights were effectively safeguarded, universally and collectively, how would we explain the death of 25,000 people every day? And this is a pre-pandemic statistic. Due to hunger, 25,000 human beings die every day due to hunger, when every one of us should have and enjoy the right to food. How do we explain 20% of the world's population still lack adequate housing? How do we explain that education pre-pandemic was still inaccessible to millions and millions of children across the globe? All these three basic human rights have been further exacerbated by the pandemic. And it has highlighted even further structural inequalities, like the digital divide, for example. Therefore, since 1948, the international community, through the multilateral system provided by the United Nations, there have been numerous commitments to bring together human rights into an effective implementation approach. So many treaties, conventions, declarations, goals. However, the infrastructure of our multilateral system can only work when governments and authorities do what is right. We have also to acknowledge and identify that. I'm afraid, as I see it, and as many see it, the world has a leadership crisis. It is useless having a multilateral system, when global leadership is lacking. We need politicians with values. We need more women to enhance the leadership value system that the world, humanity, desires and needs so much. Our multilateral system needs to be enhanced with meaningful direction. We cannot continue promising the world an agenda full of commitments and promises, and then we retract and regress rather than moving forward enough to make the peoples of the world feel supported and cared for. And the pandemic has shown us all this. And these are the lessons learned from the pandemic. Agenda 2030, its sustainable development goals, should have given us a clear framework and with accurate guidelines for each and every member of our one human family. We know clearly what we should do and how to do. Yet governments and world leaders seem to be incapable of doing and delivering. We need to ensure the implementation of all the sustainable development goals. SDG 17, the very last SDG, says it all for us. We need to strengthen the means of implementation and to revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development as a first step to overcome the pre-COVID challenges, and even more so, the unprecedented challenges brought on by the pandemic. We need to invest in our children to address the structural inequalities that have persisted and have been further compounded by the pandemic. We need to work for the necessary political will, but even more so, for the essential political determination to effect a global socio-economic solidarity approach through a sound multilateral system that ensures the holistic well-being of each and every member of our one human family. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm sure that we will further on tackle the issue of inequality that you rightly put on our agenda so strongly. Obviously, your history as someone who was very much involved in your political career and something which is called family and solidarity, even as a minister on a period of your time. I mean, this is natural reflection that you are calling for putting inequality on the table. And I'm absolutely sharing the same opinion with you that inequality is a cancer of our society even without pandemic. And pandemic actually widened that inequality gap. And maybe the best, just to remind, I'm sure that you know that, but just to remind ourselves that 10 richest people in the world since the beginning of pandemics, they got wealthier. 10 people, according to latest Oxfam report that was made for last Davos few weeks ago, is saying that it would be enough to cover all potential vaccination of all people in the planet, as well as prevent exactly what you were talking about, the hunger of the people that are now dying out of hunger yet. So just 10 people in the world gained during the pandemic wealth that could cover all these things that G20, G7, and EU and United States are trying to put together. Well, I'm using this opportunity to welcome our new member, Prime Minister Belka, Marek Belka, who was not only Prime Minister, but who was recently the Director of Central Bank or National Bank of Poland, with long experience in IMF and as a Minister of Finance in Poland. And I'm sure that he will touch base on the issues that Prince Turkey already introduced, speaking about economic recovery, among other things as well, and what we can do in multilateral world in order to strengthen economy, especially financial institutions, to be institutions for everyone, not for the ones. So, Prime Minister, I would kindly welcome you and ask you to take a screen.
Thank you very much. I will add to your very kind introduction about me that I'm currently member of the European Parliament. So I will add the European Parliament's or European Union's perspective on this matter. Well, I would like to say the following things. First, the world has been complex before COVID, and it has become even more complex. And unfortunately so, there is a deficit of international cooperation or even coordination between countries. I fully agree that there is an immense role for the United Nations system, and here I have in mind the World Health Organization, of course, not the Security Council or General Assembly. On the other hand, there is the more practical structure or quasi-structure, that is the G20, which unfortunately is not grasping the matter so far and is not trying to work out what is badly needed, is global vaccination strategy. I mean, this is the main issue now. How to apply vaccination to everybody in the world, basically. There are some efforts in the European Union to work out this global vaccination strategy. As well, we may not be aware of, 80% of all vaccines is being produced on the territory of the European Union. So we are a superpower in this. And of course there are plans or there are actions that should give a good prospect for vaccination to first neighboring countries of the southern, eastern, and Balkan neighborhood, and second to the most needy, the poorest countries. Well, of course, this is as we speak a process. It is being worked out by the day. However, there is another aspect, and I am probably well equipped to discuss this. It's the aftermath of COVID. And many countries, we see it already, are getting into serious trouble as a consequence of pandemia. We count that 16 countries have already asked for help in the IMF, and there is an estimate that 36 more will or may ask for this assistance. There are mostly less developed or least developed countries of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Well, then what is needed? we need to reinforce resources. On the one hand, there is IMF. We have to do everything to break let's say, hesitation or resistance of some countries, including the US, to increase the capital base of the IMF. Second, we have to make the international financial institution to work as one. In many cases, we have a certain rivalry, a competition of donors in less developed countries. An idea has been developed in a G20 mandated group of eminent persons, which I happened to have been a member of, to make, to recommend creation of country platforms owned by the governments of the country, of the beneficiary country, where all the donors, including bilateral donors, would coordinate, would change information, and would share tasks. This would make private capital more interested in being part of it, especially if the IFIs, the international financial institutions, develop insurance instruments for them. Because we have to know that official development aid is dwarfed by private capital. It has been calculated that all official development aid accounts for just 9% of all capital that is flowing from outside to the needy countries, including the bilateral assistance. So what we have to do is to cooperate. Unfortunately, the world is full of rivalries. China, US, the growing assertiveness of Russia against the EU especially. All this makes me not entirely optimistic about it, but at least we have to know what we need: international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Belka. I will now call one of the most experienced among us when it comes to UN, David Chikvaidze, the Chef de Cabinet, the Director of UN in Geneva, and of course, with almost 4 decades of being diplomat, and especially being in different parts of the UN, through the different parts of the world, through UN structures, started working with Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and then being a diplomat all over the world, including in my part of the world, with the late Sergio Vero di Mela, who left a big trace behind him as one of the very special UN representatives in a turbulent time. And of course, I would call Mr. Chikvaidze to take a floor to take the screen from Geneva.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. It's a great honor and a privilege to be part of such a representative panel where even the moderator is a former Prime Minister. It reminds me of the well-known story about a traffic cop who comes back to his partner and says, "I don't know who was in the back seat, but Gorbachev was the driver." Before I sort of try to summarize what I wanted to say, I'd like to, in this year of Nizami Genjavi, I'd like to extend my congratulations through Rovshan to all my Azeri friends, of whom I have very many, for starting the new year in a reunited country. Godspeed. Our topic today is how to break bureaucratic shackles and strengthen the international system. I cannot add much to this very idea-rich environment of such eminent speakers. It would be like preaching to the choir. However, I think we need to identify what are these shackles, and are they really shackles, and where are they? I think, to summarize, for me, the shackles are first and foremost our mindset. And by our, I mean the member states and international organizations. It is also the failed concepts of the 20th century, second part of the 20th century, that are not only still present, but they are actually very actively used in the and now into the third decade of the 21st century. These concepts are, terminology like power politics, zero-sum games, hegemony, et cetera, et cetera. The other shackle, I think, is the propensity of member states, especially of the more powerful member states, to mark points against each other instead of working together. And this is especially visible and especially lamentable when it happens in the confines of the structures which the member states themselves created 75 years ago, over 75 years ago, where they were supposed to go and resolve problems. They continue to mark points against each other. Previous speakers have mentioned the fact that the international landscape is no longer the same as it was when the organization was created. That is absolutely right. However, without changing this mindset, we cannot change the makeup of international organizations. And here, it comes back, and I don't want to sound like a dyed-in-the-wool secretariat official who keeps pointing fingers at the member states, but it is about the member states. Everything is about the member states. It is their organization. It is their decisions, their resolutions that are mandates for the secretariat to work. And in the same, by the same token, it is the member states who need to look, when we talk about reform, they need to look at the entirety of the UN system. Because for many decades now, at least I've been in the UN, and that's been almost 3 decades, and I think more since longer, the real true reform of the system in order for the member states to make it work for them is being substituted by a very shallow urging and exhortation for the secretariat to reform itself. And in order to induce the secretariat to reform itself, the member states haven't come up with any better tool than to keep shaving off the budget. So that has been going on for decades. Now we have a cash crunch. We call up our vendors of electricity and hot water, asking them to reschedule the payment of our bills. We're down to that kind of a level. And some prominent countries haven't paid their bills. Everybody's hurting. However, if you're a member of a elite golf club, regardless of the fact whether your great grandfathers founded the golf club or you just joined recently, you have to pay the dues of the golf club. That's a very simple approach. And on the more sort of on the less crass and more philosophical level, the UN is a reflection of what the member states want it to be. If they want it to be irrelevant, it will be irrelevant. If they want it to be effective, it will be effective. Let me just finish by quoting, apparently President Grabar Kitarovic and I have a similar propensity for reading Churchill. in 75 years ago in Zurich, Churchill, in a speech, said the following. He said, the League of Nations, did not fail because of its principles or conceptions. It failed because those principles were deserted by those states which brought it into being. And that, I think, is alive and well today, this approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And of course, now, by thanking you, I think this is a great introduction and great line to start for our member of the board, President Zatlers, who is among us the champion about multilateralism and leadership. And I think that I'm absolutely sure that he will, to a certain extent, grab the Churchill quote that we ended this and make connection between United Nations and the future of the United Nations and multilateralism, in the sense that we were reminded of Churchill. So Valdis, please, could you take the screen?
Thank you very much. And I started coming from Latvia, and we have the coldest winter in the last 20 years, and we have full of snow since the new year. So this is a climate change, not global warming. But if we want to talk about the future of multilateralism, we have to see what is the status of the deals today. And I would characterize by some very, very simple examples. So we have now the global challenges which need global solutions. It's impossible to solve them regionally or nationally. They are like COVID. It's the best example because it's natural and it's a part of nature. And we should, respect that this is not just a construction of people's mind, like in conspiracy theories. The second point, of course, is the climate change, and we can't really predict what the climate will change in which direction. As I said, we have the coldest winter. That's a change. Maybe it's a change to not so slightly, related to what the politicians think about that. But this is a nature. This is the nature, and we have to respect the rules of nature. What's the other characteristic features of the background? We live in a new era of cyberspace, and that means the multilateral organizations have to adapt not only on the global challenges, but also to the new reality of the cyberspace with no borders and with no regulations up to now. And I would say the topic that we are talking about, the post-COVID world, is premature, because we are all in the first stage of COVID world. And the first stage was characterized by every nation or was trying to find the best solution how to really tackle the problems created by the COVID. And very soon, through this vaccination process, we will see that we have to work together, because there's no national solution for COVID. There is no even regional solution for COVID. And then we come up to the role of UN. And I agree that there's no sense to talk about let's say, reforming the Security Council, because it acts as it acts on the principle of veto of the permanent members. But then I have to say it depends on scale. The European Union acts on consensus principle, which also means that if one of the 27 states doesn't vote for, it has the right of veto. So it's a question how we put veto on consensus to work together as an effective mechanism. And I totally agree that we need to look at the whole organization and look generally what UN means and why it is effective or not effective in the challenges of present day. And I would say that we have to think about new institutions inside the United Nations, which will be, not concurrent is in a competition with the Security Council, but again, complementary and maybe not pushing each other to more active actions. What are the possible solutions. Institutionalization of G20. And as I mentioned, as Marek Belka mentioned before, you know, that means that the 20 richest countries must invest in the global solutions. That's a very good principle. The second point is that there's a paradox. The EU, which is a very strong political player on the global arena, has no let's say, influence, direct influence as a union in the United Nations. And that means maybe the regional organizations must play much more, or we have to institutionalize some council of these institutional organizations within the UN. The problem is that the integration of different international organizations is in a very different level. EU is on the top, and maybe some very loose, like Commonwealth of Independent States led by Russia, or let's say Arab League, or whatever, African Union. All these organizations matter, but when you look at the background, at present we don't have clash of civilizations. We don't have clash of continents. We don't have global wars. We have regional problems, including regional wars and civil wars. That means we have to work on putting on a higher level the regional cooperation. And maybe if we restructure UN and give the regional organizations much more power and influence in UN, it might lead also for the strengthening of the regional organizations. So we have to think about all that, because at the end we will have to answer the simple questions: who will take the initiative, who will take the leadership of the change, and who will take the leadership of implementation? Because the end point is very clear. The UN, new restructured UN, is taking all these benefits into their account for better organization of global solutions. That's how I see the future. And the last word, we have to use this COVID situation, because we see that it forces us, because it's natural. It's not a just conflict between two states or two institutions. This is the nature. So we have to think how we put all efforts together. And I would say that the post-COVID world, when we come to that point, be much more multilateral and much more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Valdis. Now I would turn back to Prince Turki,
Yes.
and I would. There are so many issues that I always enjoyed in discussing with you. But almost 2 years ago on the last Baku Forum, I remember one evening when we were in French environment, we were talking about the future and challenges of that time. And I remember how enthusiastic you were when you were talking about future of your country, based on the very simple fact that there are, forgive me for my ignorance, but you were mentioning, I think, about 200,000 Saudis, students all over the world studying, enormous number of students, new generation. And you were so enthusiastic about the future based on the fact that a country like your country is investing, all countries should be investing in education and education again. And I would like to have your thoughts about how do you see what we can do and what should be done in order to strengthen the role of education, and especially not education for skills, not only education for how make living, but also education for values, for how to live. Education that is promoting inclusive societies, something which we call shared societies, which is more oriented. Maybe this pandemic is actually putting us closer and closer, and we are more and more understanding that if everyone is not safe, no one is safe when it comes to pandemic. So the role of education is one thing I would like you to touch base with, and of course I cannot not to ask you, how do you see the, let's say, as David was saying, member states? How do you see the relation between those big member states and multilateral organizations like European Union and the United States, China, and the world that you are part of? So please pick up what do you have in your available time.
Thank you very much. The kingdom has a universal education as a principle for its citizens, and that from primary school all the way through university and post university. And in all of this process, including in the university, stipends are given to the students to make them not only go to these institutions, but also to lessen the burden on their families who have to send them to these institutions. And the scholarship program that has nearly 200,000 Saudis, male and female, studying all over the world, and I'm sure in all of the countries where you members of the panel are coming from, there will be a Saudi student in one form or another, or maybe more, studying different skills. And as you said, it's important not just to concentrate on the daily and livelihood skills like engineering or IT or medicine or skills like that, but also the issues of life and human rights and philosophy and history and so on. So it's a huge program, and the change that is taking place in Saudi Arabia today is, in my view, due to these students that have come back since the program started 20 years ago to make this change possible. Our society is nearly 70% under the age of 30. So that shows you where the country is going. My generation, if I can say so, we're more observers now than really participants. But we're enjoying the benefits of what is coming from these young people who have taken over the society in general, whether it is on women's rights, whether it is on youth and their participation in the society, entrepreneurship, medical facilities, and the way that the kingdom dealt with COVID has been very, very good in the sense that the curve for the treatment of the COVID has been going down since the last summer. And we are, in terms of helping others as well, the kingdom is working with organizations like the WHO to provide vaccines to the poorer countries. God bestowed upon us benefits, financial and otherwise, which we share with our fellow human beings. And the outlook is that if you can help people where they are, the bad effects of not helping them will not come to you. It's like treating with migrants and illegal migrants. If the countries that produce these illegal migrants can be helped to keep those people in there and find a sustenance in their place, is better for them than to seek to illegally migrate to another country to seek sustenance and so on. And this is something that the kingdom works with international organizations on. You asked me about the EU and the rest of the world. The kingdom is a country that operates with coalitions, whether it is the Arab League, the GCC, the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, etc. And especially with the host country of our host today, Azerbaijan, there are very close engagements through the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And I will second His Excellency David's congratulations to Azerbaijan of having rejoined itself and reunited recently. We have good relations with all of these countries and hope to cooperate with them on all of the issues that have to do with what we heard from the distinguished members of the panel. But more importantly, we don't think that we have reached nirvana. And we accept that we have issues to deal with, whether it is human rights or whether it is the state of women in the country, whether it is providing work for the youth, etc. we are a country that is a work in progress. But we will learn from others, and we will learn from our own mistakes, and hopefully go forward on that. And from this meeting that I'm having with you, I'm going to be attending a board meeting of the Faisal University, which is a privately funded university in the kingdom that has dealing with medicine and science, but also has a higher educational level for not only international affairs and issues of the importance of human relations, but also it is fortunately for us is a co-educational institution. It was the second co-educational institution in the kingdom after the one that was built by the late King Abdullah for science and technology. So this is where the kingdom is going, a more integrated, a more open society, and a more active engager in world affairs.
Well, thank you so much, Prince Turki. I know you are being waited on another screen, but before you take another screen, I just want to pick your thoughts on what we can expect in what we can expect in new multilateral world now when America is back.
Well, I hope America is back. That is still something for us to see. Mr. Biden has made all the right statements, but the situation in the United States is a very complicated situation, and they have their own issues internally that they have to deal with. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that what Mr. Biden has said about engaging with the rest of us is going to be implemented. And we heard from other panelists, Yani, that it is not good enough simply to talk about issues, but you have to do things for them. And the United States is the major player on all these issues. And they have a lot of inherent assets that can be deployed, whether it is in medicine, whether it is in human rights, whether it is in political affairs, etc., finding peace in the world. And Middle East peace is, for the last 60 years or so, has been a twin, if you like, of United States policy. And now we see that they have made the principal pronouncements on Middle East peace, and we hope that they follow through on that. But on issues, whether in China or Russia and so on, we have to engage with them as well and bring them into the process. And this rivalry that was mentioned before, one-to-one live scoring points against each other is not going to help us resolve these issues. But working together is what we should do in order to get us to resolve these issues. And thank you for asking me these questions, because it gives me a chance to explain where we come from in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you so much. Well, now President Grabar, Kitarovic, my dear friend Kolinda, I would like to use your first NGIC family appearance, so to speak, to connect with what we are talking based on your experience. And since your very strong involvement in the different Euro-Atlantic structures, not only as a president of Croatia, as well, but I mean, from your work in multilateral organizations like NATO and as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, you were very active in a lot of multilateral fora. I would like your thoughts at this stage, a little bit about the future of Euro-Atlantic relations and what can be expected from the non-Euro-Atlantic space to have Euro-Atlantic forces, let's say, being part of new normal in sense of new multilateralism 2.0 or next level of multilateralism we are all calling for. Or if you want to, I mean, what we can expect that Euro-Atlantic forces, as you say, become the old normal Euro-Atlantic forces, the way we used to see them in a positive sense. Of course, I'm just talking about positive sense, avoiding negativities that were obviously also there, but how to get new old normal in Euro-Atlantic relations and how it can impact multilateralism per se. So please, could you take a screen?
Yes, of course, Zlatko. Indeed, the Euro-Atlantic relationship has been challenged in the past years, and it's not just by the COVID-19 pandemics. It was unfortunately by some of the positions of the former administration of President Trump. And right now, I use the opportunity to welcome the return of the United States, or rather the announcement of the return of the United States to rejoin multilateral efforts within the United Nations, return to the World Health Organization, where I think that the COVAX system should be very important in dealing with the pandemic and putting it under control, and the return to the Paris Climate Treaty. I hope there will be also a renewed dialogue between the two sides of the Atlantic. Much of it was focused previously on the 2% of investment into defense spending. However, this goes a lot wider, as I believe that, speaking about education and global terms in general, we need to look at how to translate all this into innovation. And by that, I don't mean just scientific and technological innovation, but social innovation as well, in seeking challenges in how to empower multilateral institutions and how to make all the countries feel acknowledged and that they're making a contribution. And again, as Marie-Louise and others have said, implementation is always key. So I hope that by this renewed relationship across the Atlantic, we will see not only more stability in the European Union and in the United States and Canada, the transatlantic space, but also well beyond the transatlantic space, that we will see this empathy develop as one of the strategic crucial elements of building our relationships with the rest of the world, in not just preserving peace, but really aiding in combating the developing economic situation or the economic crisis that we will see, and these social inequalities that have been deepened and that have been made worse, again, within societies and among societies by the pandemic. So I believe that empowerment of multilateral institutions and multilateralism in general, as I have said, is certainly one of the solutions. We need to see partnership in international collaboration, because we all need to realize that not just speaking in terms of the health systems, but also in terms of economic development and economic situation in our countries, that we cannot isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. We cannot put the pandemic under control without international cooperation and vaccination of people around the world. But also when we speak about economic development, which is crucial for political stability as well, we cannot think that putting things in order in our countries will help us much in a globalized world where trade depends on the strength and economic stability and soundness of other countries. So what I see in the years ahead of us, in the time that is to come, is for the transatlantic relationship to focus not only on hardcore security issues, not only on issues such as cyber defense that transcend international borders, but on issues such as poverty, inequality, illiteracy, that are all contributing to the modern challenges to our common security, and that we need to deal with those a lot more, a lot deeper than we have so far, in order to provide for the basic tenets of the transatlantic relationship, and that is the security of the transatlantic space. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kolinda. Now, just to catch up on this, I would like to call you, Madam President, Madam President Marie-Louise. multilateralism is maybe strengthened through some kind of regional cooperation as well to get out of, I'm getting out of Euro-Atlantic space and trying to reach out from previous discussion. For us in Western Balkan and for Caucasus countries and Mediterranean, very important issue is European neighborhood policy. And I know that as Malta, you were very, very involved in that European neighborhood policy. And that may be one of European Union geopolitical strengths to a certain extent, or weaknesses, depending on how European Union acts. And I'm sure that something that was already mentioned. But what should be done in order to have this being one of European post-corona achievements and contributions to multilateral order, this EU neighboring policy and looking behind this wall, behind the fence and making bridges with the neighbors. That's one thing, and connected to that is one of the key issues for one of the key challenges for European Union right now and for neighboring countries, for my country as well, is something which is the migrant crisis. The migrant crisis started before Corona. Corona just strengthened it to enormous, let's say, horizons. So what do you think, I mean, how we can fight in post-Corona era this potential new wave of migrants that can be uncontrollable if the economic and economic perspectives get weaker, especially in undeveloped and developing countries. So I would like to have your thoughts about how do you see European Union fighting with it as one of multilateral major forces, having in mind that, go back to David's member states, European Union member states are sometimes more important member states on multilateral level. After all, we have 2 member states from European Union. I'm sorry, now 1. Forgive me for my ignorance, UK is no more. But we have France as a permanent member of Security Council. We have European countries like Germany that are economic superpowers, and not to mention others. And by the way, in European Union, there are no small and big countries. There are countries that do well or they don't do well. So in that sense, I think that it would be very interesting to have your thoughts about this issue of neighboring policy and connection with migrant management of the migrants in the future. Unmute yourself. Good. Excellent.
Where is Zlatko? Our forefathers and foremothers gave us a legacy based on values, fundamental values that reflects what I have referred to and some of my colleagues too with regards to human rights. And one very fundamental value on which the European Union was founded was solidarity. And solidarity means the antithesis of nationalism, the antithesis of guarding and continuously focusing on national borders. We have also the tools. You mentioned the EU neighboring policy, and that's a tool, an effective tool if used in the right way. These 2 very important points does not only reflect in issues of migration, but also reflect within the way we work internally. Migration is a challenge, an extra challenge, one could say, to the European Union, but we also have, unfortunately, I hope it will not become a structured deficiency between our own between our own organization, the lack of solidarity. And when I'm speaking of lack of solidarity, I'm not just speaking of social issues, but I'm also speaking of economic issues. Let me take one example. Pre-pandemic, within the European Union member states, 1 in 4 children were living in poverty and social exclusion. This is a pre-pandemic statistic. We know through even scientific research that the pandemic has compounded on the vulnerable, the pre-pandemic vulnerable, even more. So I would assume that the issue of poverty and social inclusion is even more compounded. And this is within the European Union. So first and foremost, we need to set our house in order for the European Union not only to be effective for itself, but even on the world stage. One of my colleagues, some of my colleagues have mentioned the issue of the European Union not that strong and strong in the multilateral system. But we need also to be strong for each other. We have seen the way the issue of the pandemic was managed and is being managed. Some have we did not even harmonize the way we sort of safeguard the peoples of Europe. So even that, in such an unprecedented crisis, where each and every one of us need protection, need care, we could not even come to have a uniform way of dealing with it. Now, let me bring in the issue of the neighborhood policy and how this could be the right tool to ensure that the issue of migration will not continue to be a bone of contention between ourselves and also with other countries. Until now, unfortunately, I cannot really be comfortable to say that we have been doing our utmost to ensure that the people of some African countries will not continue to move and aspire to be in Europe because they think that Europe is the El Dorado. We have always, or rather, we have looked at Africa in the wrong perception. We perceive Africa in the wrong way. Africa is not a country that needs charity, really. Africa is a land of opportunity. Africa needs sustainable investment. Africa needs genuine collaboration. Europe needs to grow. And one cannot grow within itself. We can grow when we look beyond. And Africa is our next continent, our neighboring continent. So there is this opportunity of a land of opportunity. Europe needs to grow. We can invest sustainably. We can collaborate genuinely. And it can be a win-win situation for the issue of the many young people of Africa. 60% of the African population are young people. We can help with technical assistance for our businesses to grow and invest in Africa and create the necessary jobs for the African young people. I am convinced, and I have had a lot of experience engaging in conversation with young people who flee Africa and end up in Malta or elsewhere. If they had to choose, they want to be with their families. They want to enjoy their countries. But I always ask myself, What would I do if I am living in a situation of extreme poverty? I would try my utmost to get out of that situation and try to do the best for myself. What would I do if I am in a conflict zone? I would definitely flee, escape, try to find safety for myself and my family. And I think these are the questions that we as Europeans need to put across and answer for ourselves. We need to perceive Africa as a partner, but and create that partnership, but a partnership of equals, not a partnership of looking down on others and sending and boasting of the humanitarian aid. Africa is rich enough, however, it needs that helping hand to stand up on its feet. And we can do it, even for our benefit, because we need to grow. We need to economically grow. And Africa can be that land where we can help and also benefit for, not just for, benefits that can be reaped, not just for the African young people and African countries, but also for our young people and Europe itself.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Now, catching up on what was just said, I would ask you, Prime Minister Belka, if you would give us some of your thoughts that are related to what you were just you were mentioning. I mean, as a member of European Parliament, but also as someone who is very much involved and very credible, let's say, person for visioning the next economic path, especially paths that are related to the future of recovery of European Union and European Union related space, which was just mentioned. Vaccine is, a lot of people, you were mentioning very precisely what is European Union doing when it comes to vaccine and production of vaccine and everything that is related to it. Vaccine is a test. I mean, for all of countries all over the world, will they be able to go to the next layer of challenges efficiently and effectively, from economy to environmental issues, technology, education, so on and so on. Economic recovery right now, as you are well aware, like COVID-19 vaccine is not going to be evenly distributed around the world in coming 2 years. So economic recovery is going to be, let's say, in developing and poorer countries significantly slower than in developed countries, which is creating another gap of, let's say, which is one of the perils of uneven global recovery that we are witnessing in the future. Just to have some facts, just to remind you of some of the facts that are well known. When it comes to, let's say, advanced economies, about 13% of GDP was given in this previous year for something which can be called direct support to economies of the country. And 12%, additional 12% of GDP was given through the loans and guarantees for economic recovery. So almost 25% of GDP in developed countries was given in last year for speed up economic recovery. When it comes to emerging economies, this is 4% of GDP plus 3% of GDP. Smaller GDP, definitely. But overall, 7%. And the low-income countries, they even didn't have nothing as loans or guarantees, and maybe about 1 to 2% of GDP was given as a direct aid to it. So, which leads us to the conclusion that, I mean, the gap, economic gap and economic recovery is going to put additional burden on what we can expect that through you were being part of IMF and running Directorate for Europe sometime besides being Minister of Finance. I mean, but I mean, what we can expect that multilateral institutions and big countries, but multilateral institutions, financial institutions, should do in order to prevent those perils of uneven global recovery.
Well, thank you. Let me first start with the EU itself.
Mm-hmm.
It is sometimes said that the EU is needs crisis. I mean, if there is sort of lack of crisis, routine, then the European Union starts, let's say, having problems, getting into trouble. A crisis reinvigorates the European countries that are forming the European Union. The COVID-19 crisis is at the same time a big danger and a big opportunity for the European Union. Why is it a danger? Well, one thing that is probably a structural problem for the European Union, but mostly from the Eurozone, is divergence, economic divergence. Somebody mentioned this before. It does not matter who is rich and who is poorer. Well, there are no poor countries in Europe anymore, and the European Union anymore, but it does not really matter who is richer or poorer. What really matters, and it matters dramatically, who is doing better and who is doing worse, who is managing the country better and who is kind of managing the country worse. And the big danger for the European Union, especially with its common currency, is economic divergence, that some countries will consistently fare worse than the others. And let me just give you an example. Italy is an extremely rich country. I mean, it's probably, in terms of wealth per capita, it's probably the richest country in Europe. And Latvia is doing better in the Eurozone. Although the wealth per capita in Latvia is much lower. So as it happens, the COVID hit the countries in an uneven way because of the structural characteristics of the countries. Mediterranean countries, Italy, Spain, but also France to a high extent, have been hit by COVID much more severely than the industrialized countries like Germany, like the Netherlands or Poland, as I'm here with you. But at the same time, the crisis triggered a reaction. And we are now very much in the process of finalizing the so-called New Generation EU, which is a fund, well, 750 billion euro sounds big. It's not really very big for a huge economy that the EU economy is. But what matters is that we are discussing a permanent own resources of the European Union, pan-European taxation that will stay there for good and sort of be a fundament and a foundation for something resembling a fiscal union. Fiscal union is a dirty word for some European countries, but this is a necessity and we have to build up it. If we do it, then it will strengthen not only the euro, the common currency, but the European integration, the European common market. Well, that's it about the European Union. Now, what about the whole world? I totally agree with Marie-Louise that Africa is our neighborhood. It's not only Ukraine or Western Balkans or Morocco, for that matter, but it's the whole Africa. And we have to be the force behind mobilizing international resources of the IFIs, but also and I will reiterate what I have mentioned before, the IFIs working as one in a coordinated manner, in a way that they do not compete with each other, but rather coordinate and attract bilateral agents, bilateral help, assistance like China or Russia, or Saudi Arabia, for that matter, and most importantly, private capital that should have possibilities to invest in a safe or in a tolerably safe way in countries that need resources to develop infrastructure, not only material infrastructure, but also education, health, social amenities. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now I will turn to David Chikvaidze, you to continue what you stopped after your time was, let's say, being ending. You were rightly saying it's about member states, and I just want to ask you very precisely, what do you think that we can expect from the let's say major member states, starting from P5 to the other let's say G7 or G20 states that are part of UN structures and are member states, what we can expect from them, what we would like them to do. And the second question is, since this is about almost 200 member states, what as Marek was saying, it's not about how rich you are, it's about how good you are. What the states that are not so big or so relevant, so to speak, quote unquote, what they should do in order to, let's say, participate in rejuvenating of multilateral structure in a manner that we are expecting them to be so. So, member states, your lights on member states.
Thank you very much. You've just set up, I think, another panel discussion. There's so many issues there. Look, what we would like to expect is, or what we have now, let me put it this way, let me back up for a sec. What we have now is self-interest that is driving the P5 and all the other powerful governments, any way you want to cluster them. What we would like to see is enlightened self-interest. And that has many aspects to it. It has political and security aspects, but it very importantly has what Mr. Belka was saying, the economic aspect, the financial aspect. Because, you know, we, whether you politicians or we, international civil servants, we always exhort and we talk about the need to do this and the need to do that and the new multilateralism and the expanded civil society role. But nothing's going to happen unless some practical things are done. And one of the practical things is to look at the underlying the economic issues and the financial issues. Now, the UN member states' problems, I think, will persist until such time as there was a paradigm shift in the approach of those who find themselves on the, let's say, quote unquote, on the outside, and those who run the system. Because as long as there is, and where we live in a system that was created after the Second World War, and it's a terrific system. It's worked wonderfully. It has need for periodic maintenance in many aspects, definitely, as one would expect. But it's a damn good system that everybody else wants a part of, or some have already gained a lot from it. However, that system cannot continue to say, listen, buddy, it's either my way or the highway. There has to be a nuanced approach because not everybody can be from the same cookie cutter. It's a different, varied wide world out there. So the problem here is that if it's the highway, those who are left on the highway, God only knows what they're going to get up to on that highway. And that has a huge, huge knock-on effect to the smaller and the less sort of significant players in this world, one of which is my own country. And that brings me, if I may just remove my UN hat and speak personally, I think the EU neighborhood policy should not be, it cannot be a closed neighborhood. It cannot be a placebo to keep the poor cousins out but at bay. The EU is a great example for the world. It is a historic achievement, and it's with all its, for all its warts, it is something that most countries aspire to, and your countries are prime examples and are lucky to have gone in. However, the goalpost has shifted from the early 2000s, when the level was lowered for political reasons, and to today, when it's inordinately high, and it's practically impossible for some people to obtain any hope beyond very nice words and speeches. Part of the problem, and here, when you were talking about how to address the issues of Europe, there are two things. One is certainly, and this was discussed, the security of Europe, as the former president of Malta was saying, the security of Europe starts in Africa and in other places, because, similar to what I told some friends of mine when I was serving in the United States during 9/11, I said, when you have armed soldiers walking around JFK, if you want to combat terrorism at JFK, you've lost the battle already. You have to make sure that they don't enter. And for that, you need to be on the ground and be strong. This is the same analogy for Europe. It has to have its outer perimeter secured. And that, how that's done, there's a number of issues here, and you know better than I do. And the other aspect here is, and this is the last thing I want to touch on, perhaps one of the ways to regard possible new approaches to the European issue and idea is to, the EU is terrific, it's fine there, but there are problems beyond the EU. And they are much bigger problems, and they have an effect on the EU. So maybe it's time to get back to de Gaulle's definition of Europe, which actually is the OSCE's definition of Europe, or very close to it, and see how that neighborhood can be fixed. And this can be done, we're talking about the G20 or other mechanisms, but I think, I grew up where I was the older sibling, and I always heard from childhood, you're older, you're smarter, you're more experienced, you have to be more deferential to your kid brother. And this way, the EU being the powerhouse that it is, and the shining example for how former enemies can come together and be one whole, I think that is why I would see the EU leading in sort of breaking out into the OSCE Europe concept. Thank you. I've spoken too long.
No, David, thank you so much. I mean, I was also older sibling, and my parents are always hearing half of what you were hearing. I was always hearing you are older. I wasn't hearing I was smarter. But I mean, which goes back to the square one. Today's older or bigger countries, they are older, but not necessarily smarter. So we have to see how, as go back to your original question, all member states matter. Everyone matters. And in that sense, I think we should all, of course, appreciate older, and they have bigger responsibility. But we have to be smarter, especially if we are not older. So in that sense, I would go pass to Valdis. And you know, when since David was talking about current multilateral organizations as being, I mean, relatively good, having in mind everything, and there are a lot of achievements. We have to appreciate that. And it goes back to maybe parallel with Churchill thought about democracy, that democracy is not perfect one, but nothing better was invented yet. Same thing applies to the current multilateral, especially UN as an organization. It's not perfect, but nothing else was invented yet to be better. So we have to see how we can, just like with democracy, we see that after January 6th in America, the democracy always have to work on it. You have to defend it. You have to go for it, fight for it, do for it, and so on. So having said so, I would ask you about this, I mean, to give us some of your thoughts and words about how we should proceed with the current institutions, multilateral organizations, institutions, in order to make them be better. And just because we are with them and we cannot neglect them before they're not perfect.
You see, this is a very easy and difficult question, because it's easier to say than to make it true. I'll say it again. Forums like we have today are very, very valuable. Everybody has his own point of view from different angle and with different experience. So we had to produce some proposals and to talk about these proposals to other people until, you know, there are at least 10% all of the world's population who think that the change is inevitable and it should be in this way. The question is, what is this way? You see, we need an audit of all the global institutions. And what means the audit? And the audit must be done by United Nations, and they have, let's say, provide us with an information, because UN and the surrounding institutions sometimes are very bureaucratic, and we can't change it because it's bureaucratic on institutions on the national level, and it's bureaucratic institutions on the multilateral level. So, the cooperation between the UN organizations like Health Organization, UNESCO, and others, and also the international organizations like World Trade Organization and World Bank and IMF. And you see, we have to put all these things together just to see what we can do. And as I said in my previous intervention, now maybe institutionalization of G20 might be one vision. Maybe, you know, the Council of Regional Organizations may be one vision, you know. But I totally agree with David that we should stop focusing only on the National Security Council. It's much larger scale challenge we do all have. And by the end, let's use the COVID. As I said, we are only on the first stage. Because we have learned from COVID that national solutions don't work. You can't make, you know, separate deals or regional deals with the virus, you know, because it's a part of the nature. So then it will help us to better understand how we can improve our cooperation. Because I say it 100 times, and I'll say 1,000 times, EU is a leading model. Okay, with all these faults and mistakes, but I also agree that the EU is writable only when you have problems. So I think we have to meet in such audience and change the people, and maybe we must talk to different NGOs and just have the population, at least 10%, cares about the global future. And there's also one study that shows that about 10% people in each country really care about the whole global let's say, future, and 90% don't. So we are in minority, but that doesn't mean we can do nothing. You know, we can do a lot, like the democracy works. So, but I would like to say a few words about the neighborhood. And David said that the close neighborhood is very important for EU. Unfortunately, Russia is a close neighborhood for EU, and it's a fact. It's not a perception; it's just a fact. And what is really makes me very concerned about Russia is that Russia is becoming an uncooperative, destructive monster. And internally, it is becoming a democracy without democratic principles. And it's also a reality, and we should all together think about how to deal with that. And the phenomena I noticed is that Russia is interested in the bad relations between China and US. Unless the relations between China and US are bad, Russia is happy. Unless the relationship between EU and US is not in the best shape, Russia is happy, because destruction is a motive Russia has in the international affairs. So we should not exclude anybody. We should talk to everybody, including monsters. Otherwise, we will not get to the point that we can improve our world. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Valdis. And I would like to thank you all. I mean, but before I start wrapping up, and I would really ask our dear two Madam Presidents and our new members of our NGIC family. I would like Marie-Louise to have first your, and then Kolinda get ready for your thoughts, your final remarks for today's convening, and hoping that we will continue in different formats, and hope that the COVID will, I won't say go away, but it will be controllable after a while, and then we will be able to have this meeting in which some of us will say, okay, I'll give you a floor, not only a screen. So maybe it's that next Baku forum or one of the next high-level meetings that we as NGIC are going to organize when the conditions provide us, but I'm sure that we will be working together. I'm very enthusiastic about it. So Marie-Louise, would you please take a screen before we are able to take a floor?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. First of all, I mean, on my concluding remarks, I would like to thank wholeheartedly NGIC for its constructive way of bringing us and others together and converse and engage in very important, interesting discussions. I definitely agree completely that such discussions are very fruitful. We come from different parts of Europe, the globe, and yes, we do bring our different perspectives of things and experiences, and it is very important for all of us to acknowledge each other's perspectives and also experiences. This continues to enhance our thoughts and also analysis of not just the immediate situation that we live, but also we need to acknowledge each and every one of us and beyond us the perspectives and the experiences of others to be able to contribute to such discussions, but even more so in hopefully the implementation of what is right and what is smart and what is the smart thing to do at this point in time. We are facing challenges. We have faced challenges before. We are facing challenges now, and we will continue to face challenges. COVID has brought a situation to me for reflection. However, when we speak of a new normal, I cannot speak of human rights as being a new normal. Human rights have been the normal in the past and the present, and should be the normal for a post-COVID strategy approach to ensure respect and dignity to each member of our human family. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And of course, Madam President, Kolinda, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Zlatko. Thank you, dear colleagues, for participation. Thank you, Roshan, for organizing today's webinar. And in my closing remarks, I would like to refer to what I said in the beginning. This should be about lessons learned and implementing the best practices and avoiding the mistakes that we have made. The new multilateralism and the reform of the multilateral system should be about leveraging our institutional knowledge for the global good and for reducing and overcoming the inequalities. And for that, we do need global cooperation, but also sharing of knowledge that does not go only for the technical aspects, for instance, of vaccination and transfer of technology in order to be able to produce greater quantities of the vaccine, but it also goes for sharing knowledge and expertise of different institutions. So we don't need just cooperation among states and those states within a certain institution, but avoid the silo system by introducing horizontal cooperation and knowledge sharing between different institutions or organizations, in particular within the UN system, as our joint efforts are certainly will have more of a chance at succeeding. So overcoming the differences, overcoming the rifts within our societies, between and among our societies is an important task ahead. And I think that the important takeaway that we can take from the conference today is that we need to look beyond the national interest and look at global interest, because ultimately our national interest depends very much on what happens outside our own boundaries and even in distant places of the world. Nothing is irrelevant any longer, and business as usual cannot be the practice that we continue with. We really need to start looking for innovative solutions and implementing them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President. Thank you all participants today. Roshan, before I close, I would like to thank you very much, and I would like you to give us some final remarks and on behalf of NGIC.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We hope, like, it's NGIC, Islamic International Center, that as many times like-minded people are going to be able to come together and to share their wisdom and their vision, we will be able to use it in a good benefit. And I'm sure that many people are watching and they will get good lessons from that experience that you are sharing with us. And we'll be having a second panel, which will be 5 p.m. It will be 4 p.m. by Central European time, I guess. And we hope that will be also interesting. And thank you so much for everyone joining, and especially Madam President Kolinda, Madam President Preca, and Prime Minister Belka, who joined recently NGIC. I can't say anything about President Zatlers, who is a longest standing member of the Islamic International Center, and Zlatko. And David is a close ally and partner for the Islamic International Center. Thank you so much for everyone.
So, as Roshan just thanked you all, I mean, there is no need to repeating that, because it would take much longer time if I would have to thank you as much as you deserve. And just to tell you that I will be much smarter at 4 p.m. because of this event, because I have to participate and moderate the second event and pass some wisdom from this morning. And I'm sure that I will have a tough time to encapsulate the wisdom in very short and small amount of time that I will be. This shows that our NGIC work and NGIC as a platform based on Islamic and Java values and principles and philosophy based on 4 words: dialogue, respect, learning, and understanding. I learned a lot, and I think that I understand much more some things, even listening to old friends who I understand now more than I understood before, but especially the ones who I heard for the first time. So this multi-stakeholderism is something which is what we are doing, is in order to come to the next level of multilateralism. As Roshan was saying, we are some kind of alliance of like-minded people, and we will honor principles that we shared, principles that are enshrined in Nizami Ganjavi thoughts from 12th century, which resonates so much today. It looks like, 12th century is 1, 2, 1 is 21st. So see, Nizami is like a mirror. Now this is time to reflect Nizami. 12th century, 21st century. 1, 2, 2, 1. Good. I have a new link to Nizami now. And this is time that we have to make 21st century be more looking like what Nizami's thoughts were back in 12th century, which is, again, dialogue, respect, learning, understanding. More we do that, the better world we will have. And of course, once more, thank you so much. And looking forward to share floors with you as well. Roshan, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think our moderator has earned thanks from all of us, if I may. If I were a true Georgian, I would have a glass in my hand. But thank you very much for excellent moderation. And I personally thank you for 2 small but very important takeaways. You have the screen, and before you move to another screen, I'll share that with my boss, because up till now she says, "I'm sorry, I have to run to another meeting." I said, "You don't have to run." So thank you very much. And one last thing, I wish to all of us that next time we meet in Baku in person at events that Roshan is so good and so generous at organizing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.